Language models perform particularly well at understanding user intentions. And this opens up an opportunity to change a lot about how users interact with software and create products with a user experience that is vastly different from what is traditionally offered by graphical user interfaces. This is both a complex and fascinating topic and something to explore in a series of videos. Today I'd like to focus specifically on conversational interfaces. What are they exactly? Why they represent both an opportunity but also a completely new class of design challenges? And my goal is to give an introduction to how I think we should start approaching these interfaces so that we can use them to their full potential. I'd like to start by recalling what user experience is. And I actually went on Nielsen Norman Group's website and they have this definition from 1998. Obviously, it's still perfectly valid. And what is important to me in this definition, in the context of this conversation, is that the user experience is a set of interactions that users take within the boundaries of your digital products and also often outside of these boundaries. UX is also the emotions users feel when they interact with the product and how well they are able to achieve their goals. And if there's only one thing that I can convey, I'd like it to be the fact that the interactions between human users and the new AI-based features that we keep adding to our products are also part of the overall user experience of products. But is this really important? Isn't AI just an agent that is quietly automating something in the background, perhaps with an occasional chat feature on the surface like a co-pilot? Well, the reality is that AI is already becoming much more than that. We're in a trend that may change the UI and, more importantly, the UX of digital products. And this will be done through a new class of user interfaces that in turn will give us a new way of interacting with software and products, a new user experience essentially. So, what is a conversational interface? My definition is that it's an environment where it's the majority of user interactions that happen through natural language, whether typed or spoken, and where users express intent, so what they want to accomplish rather how to do it. This removes the need for navigating through menus, clicking through screens, and most importantly, for having to understand and interpret what different UI components mean. So it's definitely much more than chatbots, co-pilots, or AI assistants that we start to have now. It's an environment where the conversation is much more prominent. Sometimes it's the entire product. And I'd like to start talking about these conversational interfaces now by pointing out a few things that I think are important if we want to bring these interfaces into our products. And I'd like to start with where I think we are right now, which is still the infancy stage. Of course, there's a huge wave of AI native products. This is, for example, what makes up the majority of YC startups since the last several batches. But outside of this bubble, we have thousands of traditional SaaS and other digital products that have existed for years and that are now adopting AI-based features. And this adoption generates a certain UX in these products, but I'd argue that not everyone fully understands this yet. What I mean by that is that the tone, style, and the substance of what the language model generates and offers back to users are part of the overall user experience in a product, same way as typical interactions with UI components are part of the UX. Even if we have a single AI-based feature in a product, like a co-pilot that answers questions about some data, or a component that works with text, we need to realize that interacting with such features by users creates a UX that users directly perceive. And these interactions need to be designed with the same care and effort as the traditional graphical UI-based features. Point number 2 is that as the industry, we don't yet have enough experience and research done on how to design conversational interactions with full confidence. This slowly changes now, but if you type conversational UI into Google, a lot of articles are going to be years old. And these are mainly articles about conversational UI in the context of chatbots or voice assistants that started to be popular something like 10 years ago. But the technology even a few years ago was miles away from what is possible now with AI and language models, which, simply put, are much more realistic conversations and real interpretations of user intentions. Point number 3 is that while we don't have enough experience in designing conversational UX yet, it's safe to assume that this process requires an insanely unique combination of skills. You need to understand what user needs can be met well through a conversation. You need to understand what user needs are in general, how users use your product, what are their jobs to be done. You need to know how to lead a conversation in a way that feels natural to the human user, but is also well processable by a language model. You need to have a technical understanding of what your product can do, and also understand which models to choose for each user need or task in a way that guarantees the best performance. This is quite a combo of a product manager, product and UX designer, linguist, software engineer, someone who knows how LLMs work, and someone who can fine-tune models and know which model is the best one for a given task. And this skill set, it's probably a new emerging role, like a conversational UX expert with an engineering background, and it just doesn't exist yet. Another thing is that it's not only the UX that changes, but also the entire software development process underneath changes as well. LLMs make the distance between an intent and a working solution really thin now. A stark example of that is that non-technical domain experts and professionals from other industries are increasingly building solutions themselves. This means that we can and should come up with new ways of collaboration between the traditional builder roles and domain experts to take advantage of this new opportunity. And finally, I mentioned earlier that as the industry, we don't know yet how to design a conversation. But what does it actually mean? What's important is that it goes beyond a back and forth dialogue. The conversational UI can't be just a wall of text. Just think about the last time you worked on something with a typical AI client. That experience usually is a giant chat window. You can't really follow up on a specific thread. There are hardly any visual cues that make it easier for the human to follow the conversation. Error recovery gets much more complex. Real conversations have natural flow, interruptions, clarifications, topic switches. How do we design for users who want to interrupt mid-generation or jump between topics? And I'm barely scratching the surface here. We need a new class of components and UX patterns that intertwine graphical UI and a conversational one. And we need to think about this taking into consideration that a conversation that happens through typing is something different than a conversation that is voice controlled. So where does this leave us? I think that first of all, we need to understand that adding AI LLM-based features to our products and letting users interact with language models should be considered as part of the overall user experience. But the shift towards conversational interfaces goes much beyond chatbots or co-pilots. It's something that can fundamentally change how we interact with software. And I think that this is a fantastic opportunity for a better usability, also better accessibility in products, but it's also an incredibly complex design challenge. I hope this video gives a bit of reflection on how fascinating a moment we are right now from the UX and UI standpoint. At the same time, this is just an introduction, and I hope to cover more in future videos. If you like this content, please subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.